My base case is the 4-year cycle is no longer really relevant. It arguably hasn't been relevant for the past cycle either. So I don't really view that as like the main driver anymore. I think there's, potentially some selling around the psychology of the 4-year cycle. But I think at this point, the much bigger factors are number one.
In this market analysis, we bring you highlights from Lynn Alden, who recently shared her latest insights on the current state of the Bitcoin market. In a recent interview on the Paul Barron Network channel, Alden discusses why she now believes the traditional 4-year cycle is broken and no longer relevant for Bitcoin. She also explains the most important factors that will cause the next blow off top in the market, factors that investors should be watching for.
Early on, whenever the supply halving happened, that was a very big change to Bitcoin's kind of new supply coming out.
Hmm.
Whereas now, the annual supply inflation rate is well under 1%. It's
Okay.
a lower supply growth than gold, as on a percentage basis. I think at this point, the much bigger factors are number one, liquidity and kind of macro effects, and
Hmm.
two, the rate of selling of long-term existing holders, kind of OG selling pressure
Yep.
that has been on the other side of the institutions and the microstrategies and the ETFs gobbling it up. I think those are the two really big variables. They affect a lot more than the changing in the kind of per block supply rate. I think in 2026 we'll see a new all-time high in Bitcoin. I'd be less confident to say, if it happens in the 12 months or so. Bitcoin, I mean, something like a 30% move can happen very quickly in Bitcoin.
Right. Right.
There's all sorts of things that can change quickly. So I wouldn't try to guess too much that. The 4-year cycle has really no bearing on the asset. It's mostly things like liquidity on the demand side and things like OG selling pressure on the supply side, and how those things are going to, work together. There's also, there's increasing discussions around sovereign buying, as mentioned by BlackRock and others.
Right.
And I think that'll be an ongoing multi-year factor. So I think it's healthy for Bitcoin to get off of this 4-year clock that it's been on.
Mm.
Ideally, as a monetary asset grows and as the supply having becomes a relevant percentage of supply, you don't want a money that kind of goes up and down on 4-year cycles. So I think it's gonna mature in a similar way that gold has no particular clock that moves its price around. I
That's a
think
good
Bitcoin's
point.
going to behave similarly.
I want to kind of get your opinion on this because we have looked at this from variations of around a lot of different analysts. When you look at Michael Saylor, the strategy is approaching right now, along with even if you jump over to what's happening with Ethereum and Tom Lee, both of which are buying into the market. Is strategy on the right path right now? I know you hold MicroStrategy, but would you say in their current position, which has been a fairly devalued stock over at least the last 6 months, what do you think is going to happen here in the next year to 18 months? Do you feel like this is still a positive play for them?
I think going forward, it still makes sense. I mean, if you look at their history since they adopted their Bitcoin strategy in August 2020, they have outperformed the market, and they've managed to outperform Bitcoin. Even of
Hmm.
course they've had a very rough few months here. They also, of course, had a very rough 2022. Their overall kind of debt to equity ratio is on the pretty low side. They have an
Hmm.
interest expense to deal with, but it's not really huge compared to the amount of assets they have. Um, Over time, I would like to see treasury companies that have more cash flows. But basically, I think that there has been a demand from the market for levered Bitcoin, and the type of leverage is not callable, that can't be liquidated on a Sunday
Right.
night. And MicroStrategy, I think, has been it's done a good job of providing that to the market. And this summer, when we saw Bitcoin treasury companies at very high MNAVs, MicroStrategy was at 3x. Metaplanet, I believe, was touching like 8x in June.
Hmm.
We've just seen very high MNAVs across the board. I think it's natural for some of that to get washed out. I think it's natural for the altcoin ones to get washed out. I think some of these kind of tertiary Bitcoin ones also, it makes sense when they get washed out. They're not really that differentiated compared to the large and liquid ones. But I think that the biggest and best still have a market to provide for as we look forward several years. Well, I think it's natural that some entities are going to do the same thing with Ethereum that we've seen with Bitcoin. In general, I view Bitcoin as more of like the asset that kind of meets the qualifications of a treasury strategy. I view the other coins as more trading assets. So I'm certainly more kind of in the Bitcoin camp when it comes to that. I do like again, I do think it's natural for the market to test it out. Kind of how companies function, you ideally want companies that have cash flow that's uncorrelated to their own treasury. So whether it's kind of earning option income on Bitcoin or Ethereum, or earning staking rewards on Ethereum, that's still heavily correlated income that is kind of tied to their treasury asset. And I just think that the market, that's the environment that that's what the market wants kind of lately until the past couple months. But I think if we look forward, what's going to happen in the next cycle, the next 5 years, I think there's an opportunity for companies that actually have a product and a service, a cash flow that's unrelated to Bitcoin or crypto, that pulls in money, and companies that can kind of stick their their retained earnings into assets like Bitcoin.
Okay, so let me ask you, because I know you kind of are on the fence around where interest rates could be going. It's likely that we're going to get a cut this week. Some people are calling it a hawkish cut, and who knows what's going to happen in January. My question is, do you think we will get near zero again, or do you feel like this is never going to happen in terms of an interest rate trajectory?
Well, I don't think we're going to get near zero in an investable time horizon. So let's call it 2 years. I don't think we're going to see near zero. I think we'll get some cuts next year, and we'll go kind of moderately lower. I don't think we're going to get kind of sub 1%, potentially for many, many, many years. I think that was kind of the end of a long-term debt cycle, and going forward, the market's going to demand higher rates than that. Now, technically, the front end of the curve can do practically whatever a central bank wants. It's the long end of the curve that is more set by market prices, unless a central bank does outright yield curve control. But generally, going forward, I expect kind of moderate interest rates, where they're not going to let the interest rates get too high, even if the bond market wants to go there. But they're also, I don't think they're going to have a compelling reason, and neither is the market really going to comfortably let them bring them down to ultra low levels. I think we're more in this kind of range bound state.
As Lyn Alden was just saying, the Bitcoin market today is showing a cautious rebound following a period of weakness. The price had recently dipped, but is now trading higher, moving back above the $90,000 mark. The main driver is the macroeconomic outlook, specifically the widespread expectation that the U.S. Federal Reserve will soon cut interest rates. Looser financial conditions are generally viewed as a positive for risk assets like Bitcoin, increasing its appeal compared to the dollar. Despite this positive momentum, the overall sentiment remains one of fear, indicating that the market is still wary after the significant correction seen in the last couple of months. While a rate cut is fueling optimism for now, many analysts are watching closely to see if this bounce can break key resistance levels to avoid a more prolonged bearish trend. Wish someone taught you Bitcoin earlier? Now's your chance to do better for your kids or young family. This teen ebook is perfect. Link in the description.